Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Daniel
Everyone.
Pigeon and I'm Senior Product Marketing at CyberInt. With me today is Shmuel Gihon. He's the Security Research Team Lead. And we're going to give everyone just a few minutes to join the webinar before we kick off. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. We have a few more people coming in, so we're going to give it just another minute. All right, so a few housekeeping items before we kick off the webinar. We are recording this session, just to let everyone know. We will share the link to the recording after the end of the webinar. Additionally, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat throughout. If we see them, we'll love to answer them along the way. Otherwise, we will do a quick Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And with that, I think we can probably go ahead and get started. As I said, my name is Daniel Pigeon. I'm product marketing at CyberInt, and with me is Shmuel Gihon. He's the Security Research Team Lead. So I will pass it over to you, Shmuel.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. So as Daniel already mentioned, I'm Shmuel Gihon. I'm a Security Research Team Lead here in CyberInt. And this webinar will mainly focus on 2023 threat trends forecasts that we established. So we're going to talk about several types of threats. We're going to talk about vulnerability exploitation, of course, the supply chain attacks, which is something that is interesting to most of us, risks in cloud security and cloud technology in general. The constant rise of infestealers, how ChatGPT get along with our threat landscape, the healthcare industry, which is starting to become more and more targeted by groups around the world. And we're going to finish up with some recommendations of how we can mitigate and how we can protect ourselves from being compromised by these threats. So let's start with the vulnerability exploitation, of course. Over the years, vulnerabilities became something that is pretty much very popular among threat actors and security researchers alike. We can see that there is a big surge between 2016 and 17 in the number of vulnerabilities that are being discovered each year, right? And we can see that as long as we surround ourselves with more and more technologies and more and more services that have emerged into our lives, it only makes sense that there will be more vulnerabilities about these technologies. So, as I already mentioned, as long as we have more products, more technologies that we use, even if it's new types of software, if it's OT technology, for example, stuff like that, there will be more vulnerabilities. And the cyber maturity of this aspect is that it's kind of an arms race, right? Because the vulnerabilities are there. It's just a question of who discovers them first. The researchers that would eventually protect us from these vulnerabilities, or the threat actors that will probably use it as long as as long as no one else discovered these vulnerabilities, right? So I think that the most popular example most recent example that we can see was the massive ransomware campaign that we have witnessed several weeks ago. It was basically one or two groups, main ransomware groups that have exploited vulnerability, a 2-year-old vulnerability in VMware machines and ESXi exposed machines worldwide. They had an estimated victims count of around 18,000 servers around the world. They have requested for 2 Bitcoin each victim. The data suggests that they didn't get paid a lot, but this is not the main point here. The main point here is the fact that vulnerabilities remains pretty much the most devastating factor that, if we're exposed to, can cause a lot of damage, and in big scale, especially if we're talking about technology that is used by pretty much everyone, right? We have seen like the most common example for that is Log4Shell, but this recent incident shows us 2 things. First of all, the adaptability and the scale of campaign that can go when certain threat group find specific vulnerability that it can exploit at scale. And the first thing and the second thing is that it's kind of teaching us a lot about, well, basically the prioritization of patching and how some organizations take patching and version control serious or not serious, because the main thing here is that people and companies had two-year-old version installed in their system. So this is by itself a big thing to talk about, and a big red flag, let's put it this way.
Yeah, definitely. I think you make great points, Shmuel. I think research shows that only a small percentage of CVEs are actually exploited in the wild. Is that accurate?
Come again, sorry?
I think research has shown a small percentage of CVEs are actually exploited in the wild. Is that correct, based on your research?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically a lot of the vulnerabilities that are being exploited. Okay, so information is being shared rapidly between threat actors, and they do it very often. And once one of the threat actors have access to a good exploit kit, or find something that everyone learns from everyone, it's kind of like in the legitimate business world, then if you have something that works, you will probably, if your opponents have something that works, you'll probably do it the same in your business. And this is not a different case. Once a threat group sees that other threat groups are managing to exploit a certain vulnerability, they will probably do the same, and even will try to do it even better. But yeah, it all comes down to every now and then you hear about one vulnerability that makes the most impact. It's exactly because of this reason.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about, of course, it's the supply chain attacks. So pretty much today, you don't see a lot of companies worldwide that all of their services and all their products are homemade, quote unquote. There are a lot of things that most of the organization use third-party services and third-party software around the world. Now, this opens us a lot of, let's say, security issues, because in the old days, pretty much, you only had to worry about vulnerabilities that are in your product, right? But now you got to worry about vulnerabilities that happen in all of the services that you're using. So, for example, if I use, let's say, Atlassian, or if I use, I don't know, Okta, or a password manager, certain password manager, then, and a vulnerability was discovered, I need to be on top of things, and I need to know that there is a vulnerability that has been discovered and is being used in the wild for other services, not just mine. So this is by itself is one big challenge when you talk about supply chain and third-party services that companies use worldwide, right? Another one is the software supply chain attacks, which means that we have seen a lot of ransomware groups, and not just ransomware groups, but threat actors in general, that have been targeting open source software. Now, by doing that, what they basically did is forked and cloned the repositories, the open source products, and changed things in this code in order to gain access or do other malicious activities. And they had just a GitHub repositories that contained the malicious code. They're relying on the fact that people will look for a certain package, open source package, and will fall for a social engineering technique in this case, right? They will look for, let's say, I don't know, package X, and I will see something with a similar name and will download it, and then a malicious activity is starting. So this is another massive point of failure when we talk about supply chain attacks. And of course, the trusted third-party organization. So if I'm, for example, I don't have to use a service, but let's say I'm working with another vendor, I'm working with a set of customers, I'm working with anything in that matter, like I have partners, stuff like that, then once I'm compromised or they're compromised, I need to know about that also, because they might have information that it's sensitive information of my company, right? And theoretically, any victim that has relations to other company is potentially a supply chain vulnerable link in the chain, right? Because I can pivot from one organization to another. So it's all about being on top of things, not only in your company, but in other companies. And another good example for that is the security issue the dark reading has published on Toyota, which pretty much a security researcher was able to compromise a app that employees used in Toyota, and it gave them access to 14,000 accounts, including third parties that was related to Toyota or related to the platform that Toyota's employees use. So at that moment on, a potential threat actor can pivot and do way more damage than just these 14,000 accounts even, right?
Yeah, this case was really fascinating to me because it showed not just third-party risk, but maybe also fourth-party risk, if we can call it that, where Toyota is using a third-party application, a SaaS app, and because of a vulnerability in that, this security researcher is able to not just get access to Toyota's their sensitive data, but also sensitive data of partners and other organizations that work with Toyota. So it really extended far beyond just Toyota itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course that if we're talking about manufacturers, car manufacturers, for example, it can even lead to things that are more complicated than that, like halting a production line, and it even might cause even more severe financial losses to the company. Risks in cloud security. So this one is a bit of let's say drill down of third-party risks, right? Because cloud security is a lot of the time third-party services that we use. So but here you can see like main factors for failure of cloud security, which is exposed cloud storage. So a lot of the time our organization is having cloud storage services, and the question that should be answered and should be handled is who can access it, who can see it, stuff like that. So a lot of the times you do leave cloud storage technologies, front-facing entities that are pretty much exposed and can be scanned, can be hacked if there is in certain terms. And of course that we want to mitigate it as much as possible. We don't want to expose things that we don't need to, but sometimes we miss those things. And secured external servers, of course. So we do understand that a lot of the times we have certain budget or certain means to protect our servers and protect our infrastructure. But things like using default credentials, which is very popular in OT technologies, this is the main issue in external servers. When we have front-facing technologies, RDP, stuff like that. And of course, we need to manage the permissions and zero trust policies throughout our whole landscape. It's not something that is, I mean, a lot of the times we can see that a lot of the times we see that certain hack or a certain attack, certain campaign started or led by misconfiguration, privilege escalation or is privilege that shouldn't be enabled in one process to another. Cloud security is something that is really tricky even today, even when we still have a lot of security security solutions to this technology.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like a lot of these cloud security issues are a result of human error, misconfigurations, and not using proper deployments, even excessive permissions or failing to live up to the principle of least privilege. You know, a core tenet of zero trust. So definitely these things are hard to mitigate. You know, it's hard to totally address the human factor. But definitely some risks that people should be aware of.
Yeah, totally. Yet again, another great example, I might say, from just a couple of days ago, sensitive U.S. military email server was pretty much exposed, and a lot of internal emails was accessible, and one can only wonder what espionage groups and what threat actors that data leakage groups, stuff like that, might benefit from this type of information just being exposed from probably human error or misconfiguration error, or even I don't know, default settings of this server for some reason. These things are, I mean, this is a perfect case of how devastating this might be to a company, or in this case, a state, right? The next topic is, of course, the info stealers, the steady rise of the info stealers. The info stealers industry, first of all, to whoever doesn't know, info stealer is pretty much a malware that its whole purpose, most of its purpose, is to obtain personal information about the victim, email addresses, username and passwords from the victim's machine, credit cards, crypto wallets, which became very popular, browser history, cookies, pretty much everything that is very, very important to victim, whether if it's a person or a company. And the info stealer landscape in general is an industry that is growing steadily, but it's growing a lot. The idea is that we have like this several groups. We have Raccoon, Redline, Mars, Blackguard, Jester. You can see that everyone started pretty much in 2019, 2020, 21. They're the most solid ones, right? But there are a lot of other there are a lot of other infrastructures that are currently available and currently being used in the wild, right? The prices are, it really depends. Like the prices vary between $75 to $300. It really depends on the ability, the subscription length, the subscription period, sorry. And of course, that Redline is the most popular one, but there's still a lot of others that are coming constantly and that have established themselves a solid place in this industry. This is a good one. So ChatGPT. A lot of people asked us about ChatGPT. How can it help? What can it do? How it will go with our how threat actors will use it, how we will use it as defenders. So there are a lot to talk about when it comes to ChatGPT. We wanted to see, in case of the popularity of this topic, and we looked for a lot of issues when it comes to cybersecurity. We looked about ransomware, threat intelligence, cybersecurity, malwares, and we have seen that you see somewhat of a steady traffic regarding this issue. But if we're adding ChatGPT to this, you can see like a massive spike pretty much around the date where it was released. Now, it's important to understand that a lot of the things that are being popular is automatically being used or trying to be used by threat actors. And if you're looking about other topics that are not just related to cybersecurity, like the Turkey earthquake that we unfortunately had, the midterm elections in the United States, even Kanye West. You can see that there is they have their spikes and then it goes down. But if we're talking about technology, something that might lead us forward, such as Tesla or electric cars in general, you can see that it's something that has a spike, but then it remains in the topic. People keep working with it, people keep talking about it, keep improving it. ChatGPT will probably have the same effect. You can see it today. And you can see that even now, when people just still figuring out how to use ChatGPT, threat actors already releasing exploit kits that use it and already releasing techniques how to bypass its guards and stuff like that. So this is, I mean, one of the most common examples of how ChatGPT can help a threat actor or a security researcher in this matter. So you probably you could, at least at the beginning, give it a script or a code, and you just ask him, what vulnerabilities can you find me in this code? Now, of course, the ChatGPT has pretty much they limited this ability. Although I already mentioned that threat actors are already trying to find ways to bypass it, and instead of looking for vulnerabilities, you can ask for bugs, and then it's not literally the vulnerability, but you can understand what is the fail points in the code, and from that point on, it makes things even more easy. Another example is the idea that this is kind of a funny one, but there is the question of how many letters you can find in 19, and then you're trying to fix it, kind of feed it like false truth, I guess, and you just say something that is not true, and eventually ChatGPT can submit to what to the verdict of the user. So in some cases, there might be a chance where you can, these techniques, by the way, is also something that is being used to bypass it, because after the first release of ChatGPT, there has been limitations for what it can do, because they saw the how threat actors utilize it. But you can still, it's kind of funny thing to say, but you can still apply some social engineering on the AI in order to get what you want. So yeah, here is another one. You can see that not all the times it is 100% correct when you ask him what mammal lays eggs. But so yeah, so pretty much how threat actors can use it. So again, it's not that anyone with no knowledge whatsoever about cybersecurity or about offensive security can just go into ChatGPT and write me code that will hack this and that. It's not something that is that easy, and a lot of the times that the products that it will generate will not be exactly what we want it to be, but it will make things and processes way shorter than they used to be. So if, for example, I'm a threat actor and I'm looking to publish a phishing email, I want to have a mouse spam campaign and feed, I don't know, thousands of emails of phishing email. I can, instead of me thinking about how to write it, what is the concept, what information should I do? If I'm not an English native speaker, maybe my language that I will use and how I will write it won't be credible. So this is where ChatGPT can help me out. Now, I'm pretty sure that today, if I'm asking, just write me a phishing email, he won't do that. But if I'm writing, I want to promote a campaign that is email campaign that is, I don't know, like a real special sale at this and that, at Nike, for example, Adidas, whatever. And you should, so it will help you still. It will still create the mail. You will just use it as a phishing mail, right?
Yeah, so is that what you mean by social engineering the chat GPT? You sort of trick it into giving you the result that you want by asking it the right question, rather than saying, I want to create a phishing email. You can say, I would like to create a wonderful marketing email, and it'll give you the content that you need, but you can use it for malicious purposes.
Yes, exactly. This is exactly how you should, theoretically, if you want to create an phishing campaign, this is how you should address this issue, because he will probably won't help you out if you would just say it as is. But yeah, other than that, you can see that it also can help you with, first of all, writing code. So if you want like specific tasks, things that might have taken me, I don't know, hour or two to develop, he might help me shorten this time a lot. Reverse engineering software, which probably can lead to vulnerability discovery and stuff like that. Hunting for bugs, which pretty much is the same. But another thing is that eventually it will make the vectors of time between variants, between techniques that threat actors use, much shorter than it used to be. So this is the main concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Shmuel, one of the other great points that you made in a previous conversation we had was that ChatGPT ultimately is going to help both the defenders and the attackers. But the line between security researchers and attackers in some cases might be rather thin. So for example, hunting for bugs or vulnerabilities, you can be doing that for for honest purposes, or you can be doing that for malicious purposes. And I think that that's a really interesting point, how both sides are going to be able to leverage this technology. And it's sort of who's going to be able to apply it best for their own purposes.
Of course. And just like another quick note is that eventually you have more threat actors than security researchers at the end of the day. So I guess that we will have to try really hard, to keep up with their pace. That's for sure. Yeah. So this is kind of a funny one. Another case, another example, that ChatGPT, that after the release of ChatGPT, once it got so many traffic, it was really trending and stuff like that. Threat actors have created a phishing site of ChatGPT because they knew everyone is looking for that. Everyone is searching for ChatGPT and what ChatGPT is. Even people that are not related to the cybersecurity industry, of course. And they use this phishing site to deploy malwares and spread malwares and coin miners and whatnot. So this is kind of also teaches us about how threat actors know how to adopt and how to take advantage of certain trends and certain events that is happening worldwide.
Yeah, and they respond rather quickly to these sorts of trends, capitalizing on something like ChatGPT. I mean, we saw just a few slides ago in the Google Trends data how popular that became in a very short period of time. And it didn't take long for threat actors to see that and then, start using it for malicious purposes.
Exactly. So the healthcare industry, I guess this is kind of a sad one, but the healthcare industry is an industry that we all knew that was pretty much off limit to a lot of the ransomware groups and hacking groups in general. At least it was something that a lot of the threat groups like to claim about themselves, that this is not something that we're going to target ever. But we have seen that over the years, this moral line is kind of blurring out, and you see it happening more and more. And you see ransomware groups, and you see hacktivist groups, and you see data leakage groups. You see them targeting more and more healthcare because at the end of the day, they're business driven. They're in it for the financial gain, of course, and they're looking for the opportunities. And given the fact that ransomware in specifics even have more awareness about it, and more companies from the financial sector and from the manufacturing sector and the retail sector is more aware of this threat, and they're fortifying themselves better against this threat, they need to find their opportunities elsewhere. So it was nice to say there will never target healthcare as long as they had other options, right? But now when their option is kind of being, let's say, more challenging, the healthcare starting to become something that is maybe it's okay to target the healthcare sector now, and you can see it by the rise of cases. It's doubled the cases from 2021 and 2022. And yeah, so here's pretty much how we can try to protect ourselves and how we can mitigate these risks. So, of course, excuse me, of course, that maintaining a complete asset inventory. So it's pretty much having like a solid infrastructure that is planned well and that is being configured as it's being fortified and being packed with the right security vendors and right security technologies to keep it safe. Let's put it this way. Patch management, of course, at the ESXi event 2 weeks ago is the best example for that. Patch management is still very, very important. I cannot stress that enough, especially if you have like this wave of specific vulnerability that everyone is trying to exploit right now. The thing is that when we're talking about patch management, a lot of companies tend to wait with the update, and it's totally fine. I think that you cannot do like update for your systems every week, right? But I think that once you are going above the 1 year, then you're having your systems not updated for 1 year and more, you're exposing yourself to being highly targeted. And this is something that we should all keep in mind. Search for misconfiguration. So again, if we're talking about cloud security, for example, or third-party services, cloud security, it's a great example. Misconfiguration is something that threat actors look for when they're researching cloud security platforms, cloud platforms, cloud storage platforms, stuff like that. Misconfiguration can be even the use of default credentials and stuff like that. So this is something that you should also be very aware of and plan it accordingly. Security awareness, I think it's probably the most important one, along with patch management. A lot of the campaigns that we see and a lot of the threat groups that gaining initial access is originated in social engineering or some sort of human error, which can be solved and can be mitigated by just increasing your awareness and increasing your employees' awareness, of course, and to help them understand the impact of being compromised, of the impact of what damage can be done to the company, and of course how they can see how they can see if a mail is looking suspicious or not. There are red flags. So this is something that we really believe that any organization should apply to its employees. Another thing is, of course, get visibility on potential data leakage. I think that will pretty much threat intelligence in general is something that is maybe the most important thing. Again, a lot of the information that we have right now is pretty much out there in so many forms, and sometimes you don't even know you got hacked, and you don't even know your employee got have like something stole its credentials or stuff like that. You don't even know that. You need this threat intelligence platform that might help you mitigate it and show you that something is coming, And I really believe that this is something that we should all have, we should all be aware of, because security vendors, it pretty much goes along with monitor, trust third parties, because if you have like a good security vendor, it's great. But essentially, if the threat actor already have access in your company, it's really hard to mitigate it from that point on, right? So I think that that's it pretty much.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I'm going to open it up now for questions. If anyone who has joined us has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll wait just a minute to see if any questions come in. And in the meantime, Shmuel, I have a question here. So regarding threat intelligence, do you think that that can be applied also to things like patch management and security awareness training? Like, how much does that cover the items that we see here on this slide?
I think threat intelligence can cover pretty much anything, right? Because if let's say, for example, we know that there is a new exploit kit that exploits a certain vulnerability, right? And we know that, let's say, one of our customers didn't patch in time, or is not patched for this vulnerability, then this is a big red flag that we should alert our customer, because we know that you use this version, which is vulnerable for this vulnerability, and we see that there is discussion around this vulnerability, and we see that there is an exploit kit for this vulnerability. This automatically raises your possibility to being targeted by it and to be affected by it, of course, right? Or security awareness, right? So if, let's say, for example, an organization has like a leakage of 3 or 4 or 5 employees that have been fell victim from InfoStealer, for other types of malwares, and we're aware of that, so we can alert the organization so it can understand, first of all, who is the employees that have been compromised, unfortunately, right? And it kind of gives them the idea of, okay, the state of my employees is that they are not aware of this risks, they're not aware of this threats, and of course, to do actions as fast as possible to just to cut the campaign at the same point. So if I know that one of my employees got compromised and his username and passwords are out, he should immediately change his password. I should immediately limit his account and the privilege it has until we figure it out, right? This is just 2 examples of how threat intelligence can help, but of course, there's a lot of other ways.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up here. I want to thank everybody again for joining the webinar. Hope that you found all this material very useful. And we will share the recording of this webinar in a day or 2 when it's ready. So thank you all once again for your time, and good evening and good day, good morning, depending on where you are. So take care and thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.